Don't marry him. The whisper slid into my ear just as I stood before the mirror in my wedding dress. I turned sharply, my pulse stuttering. A strange woman stood behind me, elegant, unfamiliar, and watching me with unsettling certainty. Go home early today, she said softly, and you'll understand why. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely audible. But before I could say another word, she disappeared into the crowd of brides and stylists, as if she had never been there at all. Is everything all right? The consultant asked. Yes, I replied automatically, forcing a smile. Just nerves. But it wasn't nerves, it was fear. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my mother, and certainly not my fiancé, Daniel. I convinced myself it was nothing, a jealous stranger, a cruel prank, pre-wedding anxiety. Still, her words echoed in my mind like a curse. Go home early, and you'll understand why. That evening, instead of attending the celebratory dinner Daniel had planned, I drove home alone. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of crimson, and with every mile, a strange dread tightened around my chest. The house was dark when I arrived, silent, too silent. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air felt wrong, heavy, unfamiliar. Then I heard it, a soft sound, a whisper, a laugh, and the moment I walked further in, I froze. The sound came again, soft, breathless, unmistakable. A woman's laugh. It drifted from upstairs. For a moment, I couldn't move. My heart pounded so violently it felt as though it might tear through my chest. Every instinct told me to leave, to pretend I had heard nothing. But I didn't. Slowly, silently, I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The house smelled faintly of Daniel's cologne. Warm, familiar, and suddenly suffocating. Another sound echoed through the silence. A whisper. Low. Intimate. My stomach twisted. Each step toward the staircase felt heavier than the last. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor, and I slipped them off, gripping them tightly in my trembling hands. Barefoot, I climbed the stairs, one step, then another. The voices grew clearer with every inch I moved closer to the bedroom. A woman's giggle. Daniel's voice followed, gentle, amused, unmistakable. I can't wait, he murmured. My breath caught in my throat. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, a thin beam of golden light spilling into the dark hallway like a silent invitation to heartbreak. My fingers trembled as I pushed it open, and in that moment, my world shattered. There he was, Daniel, standing beside the bed. And wrapped in his arms was a woman wearing nothing but delicate white lace, lace identical to my wedding dress. Then she turned toward me, and the blood drained from my face. It was the same woman from the bridal boutique. My breath caught in my throat. It was her, the same woman from the bridal boutique. She stood there, wrapped in white lace, her lips curved into a knowing smile, as if she had been expecting me all along. Daniel turned at the sound of the door. The moment his eyes met mine, the color drained from his face. "Emily," he whispered. The room fell silent, thick with betrayal. I couldn't speak. My fingers trembled at my sides as reality settled over me like ice. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a nightmare. This was the truth. "You..." My voice cracked. "You warned me." The woman tilted her head calmly. "I told you to come home early." Daniel stepped forward, panic flashing in his eyes. "Emily, it's not what you think. I can explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain how my fiancé is in our bedroom with another woman on the eve of our wedding?" His silence was answer enough. My heart shattered, but beneath the pain, something colder began to rise. Clarity. "How long?" I asked quietly. Daniel hesitated. "Answer me." "A few months," he admitted, his voice barely audible. Each word struck like a dagger. "And who is she?" I demanded. Before Daniel could speak, the woman met my gaze, her expression steady. "My name is Victoria," she said, "and I'm not just his lover." She took a slow step forward. "I'm his wife." The world tilted beneath my feet as the truth echoed through the room. I married Daniel 3 years ago. And in that moment, I realized the wedding I had been planning was never meant to be mine. "I'm his wife," The words shattered the air between us. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room spun, and the walls felt as though they were closing in. My gaze shifted to Daniel, silently begging him to deny it. He didn't. Instead, he lowered his eyes. "I was going to tell you," he muttered weakly. "When?" I asked, my voice trembling. "After the honeymoon? Or after you drained my bank account?" Silence answered me. Victoria folded her arms, her expression calm but not cruel. "I didn't know about you at first," she said, "but when I found out he was planning another wedding, I couldn't stay silent." I stared at her, disbelief clashing with fury. "So you decided to warn me?" She nodded. "You deserved the truth." My heart pounded as realization struck like lightning. "The dress, the venue, the deposits, all paid with your money," she finished quietly. I turned slowly toward Daniel. "You used me." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it?" I demanded. He hesitated, and in that pause, the truth revealed itself more brutally than any confession. "You were convenient," he admitted. Something inside me broke, and then hardened. The tears stopped. The trembling ceased. The girl who had dreamed of love vanished in that instant. In her place stood a woman who understood betrayal. I removed my engagement ring and placed it on the dresser. "The wedding is cancelled," I said coldly. Then I looked him straight in the eye. "And this is only the beginning." By the time I walked out of that house, the night air felt colder than it ever had before. But I wasn't broken. I was awake. The tears stopped before they could fall. Pain still burned in my chest, but beneath it, something sharper began to take shape. Clarity. Daniel hadn't just betrayed my heart. He had tried to steal my future, and he had underestimated the woman he thought he could deceive. I drove straight to my apartment, my wedding dress still clinging to my skin like a ghost of a dream that no longer existed. Carefully, I unzipped it and placed it back in its box, not as a memory of love, but as evidence of betrayal. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop. Receipts, contracts, bank transfers. Every payment I had made for the wedding stared back at me from the screen. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the honeymoon package, all funded by my savings, all in my name. Daniel had planned everything with precision, assuming I would never question him. But trust leaves a trail, and so does greed, and I intended to follow it. The next morning I met with Victoria at a quiet cafe. She slid a folder across the table, documents, messages, and financial records Daniel had tried to hide. "We finish this together," she said firmly. I met her gaze, determination replacing heartbreak. "Yes," I replied calmly. "We do." Because Daniel hadn't just lied, he had committed fraud, and I was about to make sure he paid for every single word. The evidence was undeniable. Bank statements, contracts, screenshots, voice messages. Every lie Daniel had told was now preserved in black and white. Victoria and I sat across from Rachel Morrison, one of the sharpest attorneys in the city. She reviewed the documents carefully, her expression calm but resolute. When she finally looked up, there was a glint of certainty in her eyes. "This isn't just betrayal," she said. "It's fraud, financial deception, and bigamy. Daniel wasn't just unfaithful, he was a criminal." "And the wedding?" I asked quietly. Rachel slid the contracts toward me. "Every payment came from your accounts. Legally, he has no claim to anything. You're entitled to full restitution and damages." For the first time since that night, I felt something steady settle inside me. Control. Within days, legal notices were filed. The venue canceled his access. His accounts were frozen. His company opened an internal investigation after receiving an anonymous tip, one supported by undeniable proof. The man who once walked with arrogant confidence was now scrambling to save himself. And then came the call. "Emily, please," Daniel's voice pleaded through the phone. "We can fix this. Just talk to me." I remained silent for a moment, letting him feel the weight of uncertainty. "There's nothing to fix," I replied coolly. "Only consequences." He exhaled shakily. "What do you want?" I smiled faintly, my voice calm and unwavering. "The truth, in court." As I ended the call, I realized something profound. This was never about revenge. It was about justice. And justice was finally within reach. The courtroom was silent. Every whisper faded as Daniel stepped forward, his confidence replaced by fear. Gone was the charming man who once promised me forever. In his place stood someone exposed, desperate, cornered, and unraveling. I watched from my seat, calm and composed. This time, I wasn't the victim. I was the truth he couldn't escape. Victoria sat beside me, her presence steady and resolute. Across the aisle, Daniel avoided our eyes, his fingers trembling as he adjusted his tie. Rachel rose gracefully. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and precise. "The evidence before this court proves a deliberate pattern of deception, fraud, and bigamy. Documents were presented, financial records, messages, contracts, and legal certificates. Each one dismantled Daniel's lies piece by piece. The judge reviewed the files carefully. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, Daniel was called to testify. His voice cracked under oath. "I never meant for it to go this far." Rachel's gaze remained steady. "You planned a wedding funded entirely by my client while legally married to another woman. Is that correct?" Daniel hesitated. "Answer the question." "Yes," he whispered. The truth landed like a gavel strike. Moments later, the judge delivered the verdict. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds the defendant liable for fraud and financial deception. A wave of relief washed over me. Daniel's empire collapsed in a single breath, and as I watched him stand defeated, I realized this wasn't revenge, it was justice, and justice had finally prevailed. The courtroom doors closed behind me with a quiet finality. It was over, not with a dramatic outburst or a triumphant smile, but with a calm, steady sense of peace. Daniel had lost everything: his reputation, his freedom, and the illusion he had so carefully constructed. Justice had spoken, and for the first time since that night, I could finally breathe. Victoria stood beside me on the courthouse steps. We exchanged a knowing glance. Two women once deceived, now united by truth. "Thank you," she said softly. "No," I replied with a gentle smile. "We saved each other." We parted ways not as victims, but as survivors. Weeks later, life felt lighter. The refunds were processed, the accounts restored, and the chaos replaced by clarity. I donated my wedding decor to a charity that organized ceremonies for couples who couldn't afford them. Watching another bride walk down the aisle in happiness felt like closing a chapter with grace instead of bitterness. The dress, however, remained. One quiet evening, I stood before the mirror wearing it once more. But this time, it wasn't for Daniel. It wasn't for revenge or regret. It was for me. I smiled at my reflection, stronger, wiser, unbroken. Then I removed the veil, folded the gown carefully, and placed it back in its box. Not as a relic of betrayal, but as a symbol of survival. Because I hadn't lost a wedding. I had reclaimed my life. And this time, the future I walked toward was entirely my own.